Hey there, welcome into my studio. We are going to be working on some of these platters, bowls, whatever you want to call them, some of these larger pieces, and we're going to go through the clay preparation and then the whole making process and then how I manipulate the edges. So these are 15 pounds of clay, and let's get to it. With a larger piece like this, I like to start out with some pretty soft clay. You're trying to move around a lot of clay and you're going to hurt yourself, hurt your wrists, and probably not enjoy the whole process if the clay is too stiff. And if you don't enjoy it, why would you want to do it again? I like to make these in runs, maybe 4 to 6 at a time, and I don't want to be worn out by the end of it. So we're just going to knead this, or wedge it, whatever you want to call it. So we'll do a spiral wedging. And we'll just do this for about a minute or so, and not going to go through too much the mechanics of it. Basically, make sure you're working at a table that's low enough below your hip height so that when I'm doing this, I'm able to really get my whole body into the whole kneading process. If I just sit here and use my arms, you're going to start to wear yourself out pretty quickly. This should be a whole kind of body process. So what we're doing here is aligning the clay particles, getting them in a nice circle, ready to cooperate, then also de-airing the clay so we don't have big air bubbles in the piece. And this takes a little bit of time. We just kind of work through this. And then also, we're kind of putting the actual piece of clay into a shape that's conducive to beginning to work with it on the wheel. We don't want to be starting out with anything that's like a big square or anything that's going to make this any harder. The prep work in all of this is important. It'll make the throwing more enjoyable. So now we just kind of roll it and get into the shape that we want. Round out the bottom. Alright, here we are at the wheel. I've taken the splash pan off because this is going to get pretty wide and I feel like it just kind of gets in the way. And so we're just going to try to stay clean so we don't make a huge mess without the splash pan. So we have our piece of clay and I just set it into the middle. I'm not smashing it down. If I do that, there's the possibility that I'm going to get it off center and it's hard to kind of move it over. And I kind of use these 2 bat pins to help me get it aligned in the middle. And now I start tapping it. I'm tapping down, which is helping connect the piece of clay to the wheel. And then also in, which is just trying to help me center this whole piece. We can turn it on, see how we're doing. And we're already working with something that's pretty well centered. So now it's time to add water and muscle. Now, I don't want this going too fast. These bigger pieces of clay can really start to push you around. I'm going to start off running my finger along the edge here, making sure that it's really well connected to the bat. I don't want it flying off. Now something like this, I'm not going to start trying to cone it up and down from the bottom. I'm going to start at the top half. I don't need to tackle this all in one go. So we're coning up and then back down. Moving the clay up and down and pushing with the heel of my left hand, which is kind of connected to my body. I can lean into this. It's not just my arm working. And I'm pulling with my right hand. And that's going to move the clay up. And then I'm going to push down kind of at a 45-degree angle. We're going to start to center this clay. And this whole time, think of it as working with the clay and moving it to get into the middle. I'm not just going to sit here and hold it and force it and try to make it go into the middle. We're going to work with it and try to get it centered. Alright, so we got the top part. Now if I wanted to, I could come down a little bit farther and then work with that. and then farther down here. And once again, I have my elbow locked into my hip here, and I'm just leaning into the clay. Try not to go crazy on the water, otherwise I'll have a big mess. I'm throwing on this plastic bat. To tell you the truth, I can never really ever get anything centered fully on these plastic bats. I feel like they kind of grip things weird and offer a little bit of a kind of a little bounce to it. We'll just get it mostly there. It'll work out. Now I'm pushing down. I want to make sure that this area does not fold over and create an air pocket. So I'm going to push this forward a little bit. I want to make sure that when I'm widening this out, I'm spreading it out, the clay from the bottom out. We're going to get pretty close to the edge on this. So now it's time to start opening this piece of clay up. And when I was saying about offering more of your body up to the whole piece, you know, that's going to go along with opening this up. I don't want to use my fingertips with this huge piece of clay. They're not that strong. What I like to do is I'm going to kind of use the ball on my wrist here. And I'm just going to push that down. And then I rotate my arm in towards me, and that starts to open that clay up a little bit. And for these platters, I manipulate the edges quite a bit. I'm not worried about this little wobble. We're going to go down a little bit farther. And open that up. Alright, now on these bigger pieces, I am going to trim a healthy foot on here. So let's see how thick it is. Just use our needle tool. And we're sitting about an inch thick, whatever that is. I like it. Okay, so we're going to want to open this up just a little bit farther. Now with these platters, I kind of like to think of them as a bowl. I need a nice transition from the middle all the way out. It doesn't end up going down here and then straight over it, because that's not going to work to the nice curve that I'm trying to create. You'll get this little line that you're going to sit there and fight with the whole time. So from the very beginning, we want it to have a nice, smooth opening. Not like you're throwing a mug where you can have these corners. I'm not looking for corners in this. I'm going to keep opening this up a little bit more. And one thing that kind of gets me about it is that, like, I have this so much extra clay here, but I'll trim it off and it'll all be okay. And when we're making this, we're going to need some of that clay to help support everything that we're doing. I'm taking my time, getting this edge nice and rounded. Now it's time to compress. And I'm just going to use this little rib here. Use whatever you'd like, whatever works for you. Working on creating a nice compressed bottom. Sometimes these bigger pieces have a tendency to form cracks. Compression will help with that. There's more to cracks than just compression, but we'll do everything we can to alleviate that. Everybody may have a different opinion on the best way to do it, the best tool, whether it's metal or a really big thing, whatever works for you. So we just kind of go back and forth through here, doing our best. Alright, so we got that. Now comes the throwing. Now in the throwing, we have to remember that it's going to take this clay right here, you know, I'll put just a little something there. It takes that so much longer to get all the way around, right? As opposed to working right here, it travels around much quicker. So our motions have to slow down to give that clay long enough time to move all the way through our fingers. So the wheel's going slow, it's pretty wide, we have to work slow. We have to be mindful that this doesn't get too wide too quick. So I'm going to start my pull, trying not to push down right here too much as I'm pushing in. So much of the force is with my outside hand. It's starting to raise up, and now I can start to push it with my inside hand to get this pull started. And with these platters, it's not a lot of throwing. All right, we're not throwing anything very tall. We're going to throw a bit of a wall here and then lay it down. And now, right now, I have a lot of support to my wall. I want to focus on what do I want this rim to be. Because I can really manipulate it pretty easily without collapsing this wall since I have all this support. Now it may change during the throwing process, but I want to be thinking about what I want, right? Now I do like to manipulate these edges, so sometimes it's fun to have maybe a few different lines within this rim that you can watch travel through these manipulations. And you can do this just free form with a wooden knife, make these lines. We'll kind of work with that. I'm going to compress some of these thinner edges while I can right now. And these pieces are going to take quite a bit of trimming. Alright, so we're probably going to try about one more pull here. Don't get too thin. These are large pieces, and it's nice to have some of this clay to help support it. I don't think a pot of this size needs to have paper thin walls. Kind of feel what's going on. Move up a little bit of this clay on the bottom. Okay, so that's it for throwing. As far as pulling walls, I should say. Okay, like I said before, I'm using very soft clay. I find if I just lay this down and try to get the shape that I want and then manipulate the edge, it tends to collapse on me. So we're going to blowtorch it to try to stiffen it up a little bit. Before that, while this is standing up and it's still easy to do, I'm just going to add a little groove under here, and that'll just give my wire something to follow when I cut it off. So I'm setting myself up for that. Just keep that going at the same speed, and just a little blowtorch. And we just do this for a little bit. So we blowtorched the inside, the outside, and the rim a bit. Everything's stiffened up a little bit more. And so now it's time to start laying this down. And we're going to work at a pretty slow speed here. The farther out it gets, we're going to keep slowing it down. So at first, I'm just going to kind of lay this rim over a little bit. Just stretching out this rim, laying it down. And this whole process is kind of like it's the coaxing the pot to lay down. It's not in one big movement. Alright, so that's about all I do on this side. Now most everything that I do is kind of working on the opposite side of the piece now. I'm going to start to focus kind of on this transition point right here. That's when I was talking about creating that little groove when we're pulling and pushing in. See, I still get that little bit of a little incontinuity there. That's okay. My throwing style tends to be a little loose. It just goes with it. You may find a larger tool works better for you in this. I will change my mind depending on the day of what tool I want. And I'm kind of doing two different things at once here. I'm taking my left hand and pulling this rim down a little bit as I push down here. And everything is dry work at this point. I'm not adding any water. I just use that torch to try to dry it up, and I'm not going to re-wet it. So it's kind of sticky, It's a bit of a different way of working, and I can kind of feel that that's about all the more clay wants to go down. And that's it. Alright, so that's the platter. You could stop here and everything's great, you know? We threw a nice platter, all is well. Now we're just gonna kind of get a little funky with the rims because, you know, because why not? I keep my left hand clean and dry, and I get my right finger wet with clean water. Now I'm gonna come in here and start to make some marks. And I have to do this with confidence. It's not all consistent. To tell you the truth, it's not fully thought out. Some of these are just kind of... Alright, I could push down here and you really get into the danger zone about it flopping over here, so I'm not going to do that. But you can do it if you're feeling wild. One more like that. And yes, I'm happy with that. It's not too symmetrical. Don't feel like too much of it repeated. Now this platter has really worked. It doesn't want anything more to happen to it. In fact, it might even fall over right here. We don't know. I'm not going to try to clean up anything or anything like that. We're just going to cut it off. And be done with it. And so that's how I make these large platters. And they'll have to sit for a few days, and then we can turn it over and trim the bottom and go from there.